island off the eastern coast of Africa. Zanzibar, the Spice Island, was a vital hub for trade routes connecting Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. Under the Omani Sultanate, Zanzibar thrived as a center for the spice trade. The island's prosperity attracted global attention, including that of the British Empire. By the mid-19th century, the British had established a protectorate over Zanzibar. This delicate balance of power was maintained through treaties, but tensions simmered beneath the surface. The fragile equilibrium between the British and the Sultanate of Zanzibar was disrupted in 1896 with the sudden death of Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini. Khalid bin Bargash seized the palace and declared himself the new ruler, defying British preference for Hamad bin Mohammed. The British issued an ultimatum demanding Khalid's abdication. Khalid fortified the palace, preparing for confrontation. On August 27, 1896, British forces were ready to demonstrate their military prowess. Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini's death on August 25, 1896, created a power vacuum. The British preferred Hamad bin Mohammed as the new sultan. Khalid bin Bargash, however, saw an opportunity and mobilized his supporters. The British faced the challenge of maintaining control without their trusted ally. Khalid's swift action set the stage for a dramatic conflict. Khalid bin Bargash declared himself sultan, challenging British authority. His actions garnered support from Zanzibaris tired of British domination. Khalid fortified the palace, preparing for the British response. The British issued an ultimatum: abdicate or face consequences. Khalid's defiance set the stage for a tense standoff. The British ultimatum to Khalid was clear: vacate the palace by 9 a.m. on August 27, 1896, or face military action. Khalid fortified his position, readying for the attack. The British naval forces were prepared to use overwhelming force. At 9:02 a.m., with no sign of surrender, the British commenced bombardment. The conflict, lasting only 38 minutes, resulted in Khalid fleeing and the British installing Hamad bin Mohammed as Sultan. The Anglo-Zanzibar War began with a British naval bombardment at 9:02 a.m. on August 27, 1896. British warships opened fire on the palace, causing significant damage. Khalid's forces, despite their bravery, were quickly overwhelmed. The bombardment demonstrated the futility of resisting British power. By 9:25 a.m. the palace was in ruins, and Khalid's position was untenable. Following the naval bombardment, British forces prepared for a ground assault. British Marines encountered sporadic resistance but quickly gained the upper hand. The defenders, though tenacious, were outgunned and outnumbered. By 9:35 a.m. the British had secured the palace. The swift action ensured minimal casualties and neutralized the remaining opposition. The final moments of the Anglo-Zanzibar War saw the complete collapse of Khalid bin Bargash's resistance. By 9:40 a.m. the British forces had secured the palace. Khalid sought refuge in the German consulate. The British swiftly moved to solidify their control over Zanzibar. The swift surrender was due to overwhelming British military might. Naval bombardment and ground assault devastated the defenders. Khalid's asylum in the German consulate was a desperate move. German authorities provided temporary refuge but did not intervene. The British consolidated their victory. Hamad bin Mohammed was installed as the new sultan. Hamad was brought to the palace under British protection. His ascension signaled British control over Zanzibar. The Anglo-Zanzibar War was the shortest war in history. Despite its brevity, the conflict had significant repercussions. The British victory reinforced their dominance in East Africa. The war marked the beginning of British-controlled governance. The events of August 27, 1896 became a defining moment in Zanzibar's history. The conflict was a reminder of imperial power dynamics. The war's repercussions shaped Zanzibar's future. In the immediate aftermath of the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the British swiftly moved to solidify their control over Zanzibar by installing Hamoud bin Mohammed as the new sultan. Hamoud's ascension was not merely a change in leadership, but a strategic move to ensure that Zanzibar remained under British influence. The British had long sought a compliant figurehead who would adhere to their policies and safeguard their interests in the region. Hamoud, who had previously lived in exile but maintained strong ties with the British, was the perfect candidate for this role. Hamoud's installation as Sultan marked the beginning of a new era of British colonial administration. Although he was the nominal ruler, real power resided with the British resident, who acted as the de facto governor. This arrangement allowed the British to exercise direct control over Zanzibar's political, economic and administrative affairs, while maintaining the illusion of local sovereignty. Hamoud's reign, therefore, was characterized by limited autonomy and significant British oversight in all matters of state. The establishment of a puppet sultanate under Hamoud brought immediate stability to Zanzibar, but it also entrenched British dominance. The new administration focused on consolidating British interests, including securing trade routes, exploiting local resources, and maintaining strategic military positions. The British were particularly interested in Zanzibar's lucrative spice trade, which continued to be a significant source of revenue. Under British control, the economic policies were geared towards maximizing profits for British enterprises, often at the expense of local traders and producers. Despite the facade of local governance, the people of Zanzibar quickly realized that their new sultan had limited power. The British residents' authority was evident in all major decisions, from taxation to infrastructure projects. This period saw the introduction of British legal and educational systems, which further reinforced colonial control. While some Zanzibaris benefited from new opportunities and modernization efforts, many resented the loss of autonomy and the imposition of foreign rule. The establishment of the puppet sultanate thus laid the groundwork for future resistance and nationalist movements. Section 2. Political and social changes in Zanzibar. The political landscape of Zanzibar underwent significant changes following the British victory and the installation of Hamoud bin Mohammed. The British administration implemented a series of reforms aimed at consolidating their control and modernizing the island's infrastructure. These changes had far-reaching implications for Zanzibar's political and social fabric. One of the first steps taken by the British was to dismantle the power structures that had supported Khalid bin Bargash. Key figures who had allied with Khalid were either exiled, imprisoned, or marginalized from political life. The British also began to restructure the local governance system. They introduced new administrative divisions and appointed officials loyal to the colonial administration. This reorganization aimed to streamline the governance process and ensure that all levels of administration were firmly under British control. To further legitimize their rule, the British promoted a narrative of benevolent colonialism, emphasizing their role in bringing stability, modernization, and progress to Zanzibar. This narrative, however, often masked the exploitative nature of colonial rule and the suppression of local dissent. Socially, Zanzibar experienced a period of significant transformation. The British introduced Western education, healthcare, and legal systems, which had a profound impact on the local population. Schools were established to educate the children of the elite, often with a curriculum that emphasized British history, culture, and values. While this created a new educated class that could serve in the colonial administration, it also led to the erosion of traditional Zanzibari cultural practices and languages. The legal system was overhauled to reflect British laws, which often clashed with established local customs and Islamic practices. Economic changes were also notable during this period. The British administration sought to integrate Zanzibar more closely into the global economy. This meant expanding the production and export of cash crops, particularly cloves and coconuts. Large plantations were established, often owned by British or Indian merchants, and labor practices shifted to accommodate the demands of these commercial enterprises. While this brought economic growth, it also created stark inequalities and disrupted traditional livelihoods. The social hierarchy became more pronounced, with a clear divide between the colonial elite and the local populace. Long-term consequences and historical reflections. The Anglo-Zanzibar War's aftermath reshaped Zanzibar's political, economic and social landscape. British rule compromised local autonomy, fostering resentment and future nationalist movements. Economic dependency on Britain hindered local development. The war exemplified British imperialism's efficiency and the resilience of local populations. Its legacy continues to shape Zanzibar's dynamics, highlighting the enduring impacts of colonialism. International implications of the conflict. The Anglo-Zanzibar War had significant international implications. Other colonial powers like Germany, France and Portugal closely watched the conflict. The British victory showcased their military prowess and deterred rival imperialists. Germany, with its own colonial aspirations, was particularly attentive. The war illustrated the volatility of colonial politics and the potential for sudden conflicts. It also highlighted the power imbalance between European empires and their colonies. Intellectuals and activists noted the conflict, adding to the discourse on colonial ethics. The Anglo-Zanzibar War had a lasting impact on the British Empire's reputation. It showcased British military might and readiness to act decisively. The rapid victory was a point of pride for the British government. The war reinforced the image of the British Empire as an unassailable force. This perception was crucial for maintaining control over the vast empire. The swift resolution served as a deterrent to other potential uprisings. It sent a clear message that resistance would be met with overwhelming force. This helped stabilize other regions under British control. The war reinforced the British Empire's reputation for maintaining order. However, it also exposed the underlying tensions of colonial rule. The need for military intervention highlighted the instability of colonial governance. British policymakers recognized their grip depended on a balance of coercion and cooperation. The war underscored the need for continuous vigilance and military readiness. The legacy of the war contributed to the evolving discourse on colonialism. The ethical and political challenges of maintaining an empire became apparent. The war became a reference point in debates about the legitimacy of colonial rule. It highlighted the tensions between ideals of civilization and the realities of military coercion. Historians view the war as a microcosm of the broader imperial experience. It encapsulates the complexities and contradictions of colonial rule. The war's impact on the British Empire's reputation continues to be analysed. The Anglo-Zanzibar War set a significant precedent for future conflicts in East Africa and the broader colonial world. The swift and decisive British response established a model for managing and suppressing uprisings. This approach combined overwhelming military force, strategic alliances, and compliant local leaders. Stationing warships in Zanzibar's harbour enabled rapid and effective crisis response. Installing Hamoud bin Mohammed as Sultan ensured loyalty to British interests. The rapid British victory served as a powerful deterrent to potential rebels. The war's precedent influenced subsequent colonial conflicts and uprisings in East Africa. Section 1. The lasting effects on Zanzibar. The immediate and long-term effects of the Anglo-Zanzibar War on Zanzibar were profound and multifaceted. While the conflict lasted only 38 minutes, its repercussions were felt for decades. The British installation of Hamoud bin Mohammed as a puppet sultan ensured that Zanzibar remained firmly under British influence. This political arrangement fostered a period of relative stability, but it also meant that the island's sovereignty was severely compromised. The real power lay with the British resident, who controlled major decisions and policies, reducing the Sultan to a figurehead. Economically, Zanzibar's integration into the British Empire had both positive and negative outcomes. The British administration focused on maximizing profits from the island's lucrative spice trade, particularly cloves, which were in high demand globally. While this led to economic growth, it also created dependencies and exacerbated inequalities. Local farmers and traders found themselves increasingly marginalized as British and Indian merchants dominated the market. The economic policies implemented during this period prioritized British interests, often at the expense of the local populace. Socially, the British influence ushered in an era of significant changes. The introduction of Western education, legal systems, and healthcare brought modernization and new opportunities for some segments of the population. However, these changes also disrupted traditional practices and cultural norms. The new educational system created an elite class aligned with British values, which further entrenched social hierarchies. The legal reforms often clashed with existing customs and Islamic laws, leading to tensions and resistance among the local population. The legacy of the Anglo-Zanzibar War and subsequent British rule also included a lasting impact on the island's identity and sense of self. The period of British control left a complex legacy of both progress and exploitation. The war served as a catalyst for later nationalist movements as Zanzibaris sought to reclaim their autonomy and cultural heritage. The struggle for independence, which culminated in the Zanzibar Revolution of 1964, was deeply rooted in the historical injustices and grievances that began with events like the Anglo-Zanzibar War. The Anglo-Zanzibar War symbolized the British Empire's imperial might and military power. The decisive British victory highlighted the disparity in military capabilities. It showcased the ruthless efficiency of British military resources. This display of power deterred potential rebels and asserted dominance. The war reaffirmed British strategic superiority and global dominance. Section 3. Reflections on colonial history. Reflecting on the Anglo-Zanzibar War provides insights into imperialism and resistance. The war encapsulates key themes of the colonial experience. It highlights European expansionism and military force. The conflict underscores the resilience and agency of colonized peoples. The Anglo-Zanzibar War serves as a microcosm of the larger imperial project. It marked British dominance and sowed seeds of future resistance. British rule brought development and exploitation, shaping Zanzibar's future. The push for independence was rooted in colonial experiences. The war prompts critical reflection on colonialism's enduring impacts. It challenges us to consider the ethical implications of imperial domination, recognize the contributions and struggles of those who resisted colonial rule. Their efforts highlight the ongoing quest for justice and self-determination. The legacy of the Anglo-Zanzibar War remains relevant today. It reminds us to examine historical events critically, appreciate the resilience of those who lived through these times. The Anglo-Zanzibar War